Rumpole and the Angel of Death by John Mortimer. Read by Leo McKern. Rumpole and the Little Boy Lost. "Whoever did that," Dot Clapton said, "deserves burning at the stake." "I'm afraid they abolished that a few years ago." I took the Daily Trumpet our Dot was offering me across her typewriter. What I saw was a big photograph, almost the whole tabloid front page. A young woman wearing a T-shirt and jeans was looking into the camera, trying to smile. A husband, only a few years older, puzzled and frowning, had his arm protectively around her shoulder. Their child had been snatched away from them, hidden among strangers, and perhaps— It was the awful perhaps which made Steve Constant put his arm round his wife, and why her smile might turn so easily into a scream. "Sheena Constant talks exclusively to the Trumpet," the front page told the world. "See centre story." "If they catch the old witch what did it, you wouldn't speak up for her in court, would you, Mr. Rumpole?" I turned over to the central spread, entirely devoted to the little boy lost. There were snaps of the family at the seaside by a swing in the garden of the semi, and a picture of the huge South London hospital, gaunt and unfriendly as a nuclear power station, from which Tommy Constant had unaccountably disappeared. I was trying to remind Dot of an Old Bailey hack's credo. "I'm a black taxi, Dot," I told her, "plying for hire. I'm bound to accept anyone, however repulsive, who waves me down and asks for a lift. I do my best to take them to their destination, although the choice of route, of course, is entirely mine. The destination of her what nicked that child would be burning at the stake, if you want my honest opinion." I have to confess that I wasn't giving Dot my full attention. There wasn't a long story between the pictures, but what there was had been written in the simple, energetic style of the Daily Trumpet, which I thought might be appreciated by a jury. 24-year-old Sheena Constant spoke through her tears. "After he was seen by the doctor, I put him on the kiddies' mechanical donkey in the outpatient assembly. He's been on it before, so I left him with Steve while I went to the toilet. Steve just crossed over to buy a packet of Marlboro. He was in sight of Tommy and only turned away for about a minute. It was during that time our little son was stolen off us. He sort of vanished, clutching a little yellow flop-eared rabbit, which was his favourite toy." Police investigations continue. Who was the pale-faced woman in a black beret and black plastic mac carrying a toddler away from outpatients? Where were the social workers? Where was hospital security? These are the questions the Trumpet will be asking during the coming week. Tomorrow, why my daughter's heart is broken. Tommy's gran talks exclusively to the Trumpet. "We've got her." Claude Erskine-Brown had entered the clerk's room in a state of high excitement. "Got her at last." "The woman who stole little Tommy?" I was still absorbing the Trumpet's simple story. "Of course not. We've got Katerina Reagan to sing for us in the Outer Temple Hall." "Have you, by God?" I folded the Daily Trumpet neatly and put it back on Dot's typewriter. "I doubt whether I shall be among those present." "She will give us Schubert." "As far as I'm concerned, she can keep him." "And the Bar Musical Society, of which by a strange quirk of fate I seem to have become president, will be hosting a small champagne reception afterwards. The 18th of this month. Put it in your diary, Horace." "I'm sorry, but Hilda and I will be entertaining." "Entertaining who?" "Each other, to a couple of chops in Froxbury Mansions. Awfully sorry, old darling. Previous engagement." That night we were settled in front of the television in the mansion flat when Hilda said, "I hope you've got the 18th marked down in your diary, Rumpole." "Yes, I have. I'm staying at home." "Oh, no, you're not." And then my attention was grabbed by the television, on which an astonishingly young superintendent was holding a press conference. He sat between Sheena and Steve Constant. "I just want to say to whoever's got Tommy, we can understand your problems. We think you may need help, and we'll see to it that you get it. So will you ring us at this number that we'll put up on the screen in a minute, and tell us where Tommy is? We're sure he's alive and well." Here Sheena looked down, a hand to her forehead, covering her eyes. Steve's teeth were clenched, his jaw set, his face a mask of misery. I found myself taking the chamber stairs like a 2-year-old, and arrived panting in the clerk's room, feeling every day of 74. I could hardly find enough breath to ask Dot for a quick loan of her daily trumpet. Mrs. Bellow, Sheena's mum, was reminiscing. Sheena had been a model child who did well at school and had a really lovely singing voice, and was so pretty that the family hoped she might end up in television. Anyway, Sheena gave up her chance of becoming famous when she met Steve at a party, a young computer salesman who was going to do very well for himself in the fullness of time. She started going out with him. Tommy's gran had always thought they were an ideal little family. On Saturday, Chambers was shut, and Dot's trumpet was not available. On my way to Safeway's, with she who must be obeyed for shopping duty, I read the posters and crossed the road to buy the paper. I saw a young mother with her face lit up and an apparently unharmed child in her arms. I thought the huge headline surprisingly literary. "Little boy found," it said. I gave a great cry of joy. "Rumpole!" The captain of my fate called briskly from the other side of the road. "What on earth are you doing?" "I am whooping," I told her. "Whooping with delight. Tommy Constant has been found, and all is more or less right with the world." Later, some time later, I was to learn even more about the great kidnapping case. It was a hot night in late summer, near midnight apparently, when the Constants got the telephone call, a woman's voice. 19 Swansdown Avenue, was all it said. "You'd better get there quick." Later, the call was traced to a phone box at the end of nearby Swansdown Avenue. Later still, Sheena said that she thought she recognized the hidden voice. The Constants drove at high speed to Swansdown Avenue, less than a mile from their house. They didn't dare to hope, but couldn't help but hear. The place was a tip, Sheena said in her interview. The couple went from room to room, Sheena said, fearing what they might see in the shadows, and for a long while they avoided the garden, terrified of signs of recent digging. And then, sickened by the lingering smell of unwashed bodies and rotting food, Sheena pushed open a bedroom window and found herself looking down into a rank garden. Then she heard a child cry. Tommy had been playing quite happily in the dark garden until he stung his hand on a clump of nettles. In that filthy house he was clean, well-dressed, and seemed in excellent health. He greeted his mother and father without visible surprise. A week later, Superintendent Greengross told the Daily Trumpet that Thelma Ropner of 17 Swansdown Avenue was helping him with his inquiries. She was charged. Her defense was reserved, and after a good deal of argument from Mr. Bernard, her solicitor, she was granted bail. I was heavily penciled in as counsel for the defense, and the faggots round the stake were no doubt ready for lighting. "She's in your room, Mr. Rumpole, and she's wearing the black mac." That morning Doc Clapton's Botticelli face was set in anger and contempt. "It is raining, Dot, as usual." "So does she have to wear the same mac? Some sort of nerve she must have, mustn't she?" I pushed open the door of my room, and it seemed, in some curious and quite evil way, to be dominated by Miss Thelma Ropner. Thinking back, it seems absurd to have felt so instantly chilled. Thelma was almost a caricature from a movie. She was very pale. She looked both unpleasant and unhappy. And she wore, as Dot had said, with what was either bravado or sheer stupidity, the black beret set at what might have been intended as a cheeky angle, and the unmistakable, shiny, crackly, black plastic mac, which protected her like the armor of a crustacean. One thing was absolutely certain. She could never have got out of a hospital carrying a child unnoticed. "It's a complete waste of time, Mr. Rumpole. I never ever took Sheena's child. I wouldn't want to." "You call Mrs. Constant Sheena," I couldn't help noticing. "Do you know her?" "Know her? Of course I know her. We were at Cripps together." "Cripps?" "Oh, Cripping Comprehensive." "You mean you were close friends?" "We got on all right. Sheena was quite good fun until she met Steve and lost her femininity." "I'm not entirely sure what you mean. She got married and had a baby. Was that losing her femininity?" "Of course it was." Thelma sighed again at my question. "Do you think Sheena felt in a rut?" I wondered. "Of course she did. She was awfully envious of Tina Santos when she got her name in all the papers for bulking some dreadful little government minister. Sheena always wanted to be famous, like a telly star or something. Well, I suppose she is now, in a way. Famous. Not the way she'd like, I'm sure. Oh, probably not. You think everyone who has a baby gets stuck in a male-dominated rut?" She looked at me then and said, "You mean I had one?" "So you say in your statement." "And they're going to use it against me?" "What do you mean?" "They're going to use it against me that Damon died." "I suppose it might provide a motive." "Well, let me tell you, Mr. Legal Eagle, that if I wanted to nick a child, I certainly wouldn't have chosen Sheena's." "If you say anything like that in court, we might as well plead guilty and start your sentence as soon as possible." "Is there anything you want to ask me?" "On that moonlit night, did you see Tommy Constant down there among the nettles?" "Ah, hardly. On that moonlit night I was fast asleep." I picked up another statement. "Brian Edmonds is your landlord, I see. A professor?" "Professor? He teaches communication studies at some rotten poly that now calls itself the University of South-West London." "Well, the Edmonds both say that they didn't see you in their house at all during the week Tommy Constant went missing." "I was there every night. I've got my own key, you know." "They say they couldn't tell if you'd slept in your bed during that week. I told them not to look into my room." "What were you doing during that week?" "I do work, Mr. Rumpole. I have to work to live." "Where do you work, Miss Ropner?" "Oh, anywhere that's interesting and worthwhile and exciting. I help out a lot at groups." "Such as?" "The Stick-Up Theatre Company." "During each night that little Tommy was missing, you tell me you were sleeping at the Edmonds house?" "Entirely alone, Mr. Lawyer, without even a 3-year-old in bed with me." On the night young Tommy was found in the garden of number 17, Mrs. Edmonds says she was up with her baby. Oh, surprise, surprise. Thelma Ropner gave a small, mirthless laugh. She was looking out of the first-floor bedroom window. I saw someone under the street lamp in front of number 19, I read aloud. It looked like a woman in a black plastic mac and a beret. I thought it was Thelma, but she was pushing something, a pram or a pushchair. I couldn't be sure. Well, if Polly Edmonds thought she'd seen me, why didn't she rush down or at least call the police? Yes, that's a very good point for cross-examination. Thank you. I sorted through a number of police officer statements and found the description of number 19's unlovely garden patch. The police found wheel marks on the wet ground which might have been made by a pushchair. There were plenty of footprints. Prints that fitted a pair of your shoes were found in the garden of number 19. Of course they were. I was there the night before. It was pretty muddy then. You went into the garden? Well, lots of people did. Why? Number 19's the only place you meet interesting people. After a session with Thelma Ropner, there was only one place to go, and I stumbled towards it as a parched, sun-crazed Bedouin might crawl towards an oasis. The first 2 glasses of liquid hardly banished her chilly memory. Then a strange voice said, "Gotcha, Mr. Rumpole. Trapped you in your lair, sir." At the same time, a card was slapped on the bar in front of me, bearing the legend, "Jonathan Argent, Daily Trumpet." I looked up, expecting to be staring at the craggy features and moist eyes of a tabloid journalist marinated in whiskey, a sweat-stained Trilby, and a dirty Mac. I saw what seemed to be an impertinent sixth former. Argent said, "Why not ditch that ghastly-looking cough mixture and join me in a bottle of the Dom?" "Of the what?" "Dom Perignon." I am, I hope, a fair-minded man, and I thought I should consider his offer without prejudice and come to a fair conclusion. "I must admit that your paper gave the Tommy Constant case very thorough coverage," I told him. "Oh, we want it to be much more serious than that, sir. I think there's an empty table in the corner." Young Argent said, when we landed safely at the table, "I'm glad you thought we told Sheena's story well, sir. Now we want to do the same for Thelma." "Do what?" "Tell her story. It'll be told in court." "We want to do Thelma's story." Jonathan Argent looked very serious and sincere, his eyes wide and his voice particularly quiet, "in a way which will be 100% fair and sympathetic. If Miss Ropner wants to tell you her story when the trial's over, that's entirely up to her. I don't think Miss Ropner's going to be in much of a position to speak to anyone when the trial is over." Jonathan Argent was smiling. "Why, do you assume she's going to be convicted?" "Surprise me, then. You've got some brilliant defence tucked away under that old hat of yours. Have you, quite honestly, sir?" "We shall see," I said, "what we shall see." "Quite honestly, Mr. Rumpole, it's not so much Thelma we're after." "Oh, who are you after, then? You seem to have squeezed the best out of the Constant family." "We're after you, Mr. Rumpole. We want to tell your story. Why I'm defending Thelma Ropner, the most hated woman in England." "I can't do it." "Why ever not? I'd write it for you." "It would be against all the best traditions of the bar." "You might find it extremely profitable." "How profitable? I only ask out of idle curiosity." The young hack looked round conspiratorially, made sure no one was listening, and then offered me a sum of money expressed in K's, which I took to be thousands. I stifled a huge yawn. "No, thanks," I told him politely. "It's too late for all that sort of thing." "That isn't the end of the story, sir. With syndication it might be much more." I drained my glass. "In the circumstances, I think it best if I pay for the Dom Perignon." As I walked towards the door, I heard him call after me, "And we'll keep in very close touch indeed, sir." I discovered later, a good deal later, that when I was being given the expensive sauce, my learned but incautious friend, Claude Erskine Brown, Q.C., was engaged in his first romantic encounter with the statuesque Regan. The place chosen for this tryst was the glittering glass and brass 1930s Galaxy Hotel in the middle of Mayfair. I decided to visit the scene, or rather the scenes, of the crime. We went in Bonnie Bernard's unwashed Fiesta. Our first call was the Springtide General Hospital. In the concourse in front of the outpatients there was a children's corner, a broken playpen, a huge pink teddy bear, and a mechanical donkey on which a small child might enjoy a stationary trip for 20 pence. "Is there anything you want me to do here?" Bernard was as anxious as I was to get out of this house of healing. "Find out what was wrong with little Tommy. I mean, why did they take him to the outpatients that morning? It wasn't an accident, we know that. Sudden sickness? Sheena says that in her statement. What sort of sickness exactly? Find that out, Bonnie Bernard, in the fullness of time. Where to next, Mr. Rumpole?" "Up to Redwood Road, I think, just for a glance at the matrimonial home." I had seen the semi-detached in Redwood Road before, faintly in that first picture in the Trumpet. Now it seemed bigger and brighter than I had expected. The front garden looked as though it had been recently trimmed. Parked in front of the garage was a low-lined, bright-red, sporty model with a number Mr. Bernard knew to be recent. If the Constants had come into a bit of money, I saw no reason, after their week of misery, why they should enjoy it. Then a middle-aged woman in a bright yellow dress came out of the house and started to snip a bunch of early straight-stalk and military tulips in the front garden. She had reddish hair, a pale face, and a sharp nose. On the way down Swansdown Avenue, I looked idly out of the window. I saw a peeling hut with blackened windows and a sign advertising "Therapeutic Massage and Sauna." The next shop had a surprising and half-broken neon sign. Psychic, it must have once said, when all the letters were fully operational. "Astrological signs charted and considered. Clairvoyant advice given." The shop window was empty, except for a white vase which contained 3 wilting tulips and a photograph. It was a glimpse of that photograph that made me ask Bernard to park, and I got out and stood examining it, and the window display. In the shadows of the small room behind it, I was sure I saw something of importance to our case. I tried the door, but it was locked, and when I got back to the car, Bernard said, "What did you want, Mr. Rumpole, to know our future in Regina versus Thelma Ropner?" "I'm afraid," I told him, "that we don't need a chart to tell us that the omens are against us. The star sign of the Constants, however, is definitely in the ascendant." As we drove off toward Thelma's pad, another sporty car turned out from under a sparse clump of trees. The driver seemed a very young man, and I made sure he was following us. Swansdown Avenue produced no surprises. The tip in which young Tommy had been discovered lived up to its sordid reputation, and the front garden of number 17 next door was not much tidier. There was the thin, insistent cry of a baby, and I saw an upstairs window from which Mrs. Edmonds would have had a clear view of the front gate of number 19, which was opposite a street lamp. I decided that my legal team and I couldn't go much longer without a drink. We found the old Pickwick at a crossroads about half a mile from Swansdown Avenue. Bernard and I sat in a cavernous bar where banks of electronic games squeaked and flashed and muttered angrily around us. "Sherlock Rumpole, have you brought the magnifying glass and the deerstalker?" I turned to find young Argent of the Trumpet breathing down my neck. "A word in your ear, if I might. A very private word." Argent ignored Bernard and ordered himself a brandy and soda. "I have no secrets from my instructing solicitor." "Oh, but the lawyer we're going to talk about probably has. And this hasn't got anything to do with little Tommy Constant. Not for the moment, anyway." Bernard, who could take a hint almost before it was dropped, filtered off to telephone his office, and the man from the Trumpet opened a slim leather briefcase and laid a glossy photograph on the bar. I didn't look at it. "Are you offering me money?" I asked him. "Take a look." I glanced down. What I saw was the prize idiot and Queen's Counsel, Claude Erskine-Brown, locked in the sturdy embrace of Ms. Katerina Regan. Top lawyer and judge's husband in afternoon bonk with German Nightingale. Not a bad little story for us. "They are simply friends," I hastened to assure him. "I know he admires her voice." "Admires her silver tongue so much that they went up to room 307 together and didn't emerge from the Galaxy until 5:30 in the afternoon." "Well, he probably had nothing on in court. It often happens." "He might try to have something on in court if we tell him we're publishing this. You wouldn't want us to do that, would you?" "I don't see why I should care," I told Argent. "The honour of your chambers is at stake, sir. Its reputation for high morals and respectability. And think of the effect on her ladyship, his wife, the learned judge. Just about blow her wig off, wouldn't you say?" "I can't see that this," I pushed the photograph back towards Argent, "is of the slightest interest to your readers." "Oh, you don't know our readers, sir. They love reading about the great and good bonking. Saves them all the trouble of doing it for themselves." "But you won't publish it?" "That depends." "Depends on what?" "On whether you're going to give us another story, how I defended Thelma." I said, "When would you want it?" "Run the first installment the day before the trial. No desperate hurry." "Can I have that picture?" I asked him. "Of course you've got the negative." "Oh, of course. One thing you might do for us if we keep your learned friend off the front page." "Well, what's that?" "Couldn't you give me a little taster? Just a hint, you understand, of your approach to the defence of the wicked witch." "Perhaps I'd say that if I were a wicked witch, I think I'd be careful not to dress as one. But you can't print that yet." "Understood. We'll save it for your first installment. Anything else?" "Just that I wonder where Thelma Ropner is meant to have kept Tommy locked up, fed, cleaned, and watered for a week." "Have you any ideas?" "Not yet," I said. "Let me know when you have. We'll be in constant touch." Argent drained his brandy and left, leaving me, in spite of all the Trumpet's promises to make my fortune, to pay for it. "My name coupled with that of Katerina Regan," Claude Erskine-Brown said, and I detected an unmistakable note of pride in his voice. "Not only are your names coupled," I assured him, "everything about you is said to have been coupled also." The chump picked up the photograph and examined it closely. "Doesn't she look beautiful?" he purred. "And don't you think I'm looking rather young?" positively childlike," I told him. "I'm sure Phillida will tell you what a spring chicken you look when she sees the front page of the Trumpet." "That would not be a good thing. They won't really publish it, will they? Not in a tabloid, if I let them." "You have some influence over the Trumpet, Rumpole?" Claude's voice was full of hope. "Perhaps a little." You would act for me in this matter?" "Well, you obviously need help." "On the whole," he said, after having given the matter deep thought, "I think it better that the very beautiful thing Katerina and I have for each other should remain a secret. It would be better for Chambers, and considerably better for you. Oh, I'm not in the least ashamed of loving Katerina. But Mrs. Justice Phillida Erskine-Brown would condemn you to a long stretch of withering contempt if she got to hear about it." "I suppose you're right. Perhaps you'll let me look at this from time to time, though, eh? Just to remember." "To remember what?" "The day I had lunch with Katerina." "At the Trumpet they don't think that's all you had." "Oh, don't they?" Claude was smiling complacently. "It was a wonderful experience." "How wonderful exactly?" "Well, we went into the restaurant. Well, you would do if you were having lunch. And sat down. You amaze me. And talked about Schubert. Oh, please, Erskine-Brown, spare me the embarrassing details. And then she asked me up to give me her new CD. Is that the end of the story?" "Until the next time." "Next time?" "She said we must have lunch again. The Trumpet thinks you stayed until 5:30 when you came out again and kissed. What time did you leave the Galaxy Hotel?" "Oh, about 2:30, I think. I went out the back entrance." As soon as the door had closed on him, I forgot Claude and his troubles. I had other things to think of. I thought of them for a long time, and then I rang Bonnie Bernard and asked him to send round copies of every piece the Trumpet had published about Sheena Constant and the little boy lost. There was something in one of them, I felt sure, which was of great importance for me to remember. And then, to complete the story, I told him to get all they had written about Tina Santos. Now, when I think about it again, I'm sure the voice I heard on the telephone that night we found Tommy, the voice that told us to go to 19 Swansdown Avenue, was Thelma Ropner's. I was at school for many years with Thelma, and we used to be close friends. I'm prepared to give this evidence on oath in court." The prosecution had served Sheena's additional statement on us, and with considerable reluctance I had told Bernard to get Thelma in for another conference. "Is that what Sheena says?" Miss Ropner laughed. "Ha! Then Sheena's lying." "Why would she lie?" "Because she doesn't like me. She's never liked me, since I told her what a boring little company creep her precious Steve was." "I just hope you've told me the truth. If you haven't, it's going to make life very difficult for me." "Ah, poor old you!" She was still laughing. "Can't you cope with difficult cases? Anyway, it's true. I didn't take Tommy." "Did you tell me the truth about what you were doing during the week he went missing?" "I tell you I was sleeping at the Edmonds and working during the day." "What do you do with a client who won't stop lying to you?" I asked Bonnie Bernard. Then I told him to engage the services of a seasoned private eye to discover exactly what Thelma was up to during the week of Tommy's captivity. "I sent for you, Rumpole, as a senior member of Chambers, because I have had some most unhappy news." "Oh, then I'll be going. I've got quite enough worries at the moment." "Claude Erskine-Brown," Soapy Sam Ballard rabbited on, "has dishonoured his silk. He has committed adultery." Claude's no more capable of adultery than he is of winning a difficult case. Rumpole, I've had it from his own mouth." He was boasting. Ballard gasped for breath. "I have told Erskine Brown that if this scandal becomes public knowledge, there will be no room for him in chambers." "Oh, don't worry your pretty little head, Sam. This isn't going to be a scandal." "How can you be sure of that?" "Because if Claude's Don Giovanni, I'm Tarzan of the Apes." And I left before he could argue. The psychic shop was open at 3 the next afternoon when I pushed open the door. A bell pinged faintly as I opened the door. There was a bead curtain at the back of the shop. It rattled, and a woman entered like a burst of sunlight. She was the woman I had seen in the Constance front garden snipping tulips, the woman whose photograph was in the window of the psychic shop. She was Steve's Aunt Brenda, who'd been in touch with the spirit world for news of the little boy lost. I said, "You are Miss Brenda Constant, aren't you?" She was not at all surprised. "I suppose I'll have to get used to the fact that I've become famous." She was middle-aged, but she giggled like a young girl. "I can't complain. It's brought me a lot of customers." "Because of little Tommy?" "Because the spirit people were able to tell us who'd got the baby." "And who had?" "Thelma Ropner, of course. She was always jealous of Sheena. Now then, do please sit down and tell me your name." "Samuel Ballard." I couldn't help it. It just occurred to me as I sat on a hard and sticky plastic chair and rested my elbows on the pink formica. I didn't have to go on too long before the shop door pinged. She put down her scarlet biro and exited through the bead curtain. I got up and crossed to the window. It was then that I saw, on the strip of crazy paving, what I thought I had once seen in the shop, a child's pushchair with something on the seat, which I was sure could be described as a yellow flop-eared rabbit, much clutched and frequently caressed. I could hear Auntie Brenda's grand and busy greeting to a prospective customer in the shop. There was a long cupboard built against one wall of the astrological consulting room. I slid back the door as quietly as possible, and was surprised, as I often am, by the casual way in which many people preserve evidence. Hanging uncertainly on a wire coat-hanger, I saw a shiny black plastic mackintosh, and on the shelf above it, a dark beret. "One last question, Mrs. Sheena Constant," said Mr. Fanner, the prosecuting counsel. "Looking back on that telephone call in which you were told to go and look in 19 Swansdown Avenue, can you now say who you think called you?" "I'm quite sure who it was now." Sheena smiled from the witness-box. "It was someone I'd known from school." "What was her name?" "Thelma Ropner." I rose to cross-examine Mrs. Constant. "You say you were at school with my client, Thelma Ropner?" "Yes." "And were you also at school with a girl called Tina Santos?" "Oh, Tina, yes, I knew her." "And did she become the secretary of a local MP called David Bangor, parliamentary secretary to the Minister for Enterprise?" "She worked for a politician. I think that's what Tina did." "You know what Tina did, don't you? She had a well-publicized love affair with the honourable member." "Mr. Rumpole?" "I think I did read something about it, yes." "Do you know how much Tina Santos got paid for that story?" "Mr. Rumpole!" "I think it was quite a lot, a ridiculous lot of money it was. Easy money, wasn't it?" "Much too easy, I'd say, for Tina." Mrs. Constant, how much did the Trumpet pay you for the exclusive rights to the story of your little boy lost? That's no business of yours, that isn't. I don't have to tell him that, do I? Certainly not. The question was entirely irrelevant. Members of the jury, you will ignore Mr. Rumpole's last question. I shall adjourn now, Mr. Rumpole. By tomorrow morning, perhaps you will have thought of some relevant questions to ask this witness. Tomorrow morning, my lord, I shall hope to demonstrate that the question I just asked was entirely relevant. I have ruled on that, Mr. Rumpole. I trust the jury will put it completely out of their minds. But I knew the jury wouldn't. The researches of the admirable Fig Newton, my favourite private eye, had allowed me to serve an alibi notice on the prosecution, and I asked their man, known to me only as Lenny the Lion-Hearted, if the forces of law and order had been able to check the story the alibi contained. "Oh, I'm not sure, Rumpole. I'll have to speak to the officer in charge of the case." "Well, screw up your courage, old darling, to the sticking point," I encouraged him, "and do just that." Then, as Lenny went off on his daring mission, I heard Argent's voice at my elbow. "Well, sir, you seem to know a lot about the Trumpet's money. Are you going to let us pay you a slice of it?" "I'll meet you in Pomeroy's. 6 o'clock convenient?" "You'll let us in on your defence?" "Oh, it's possible." "Oh, you know that picture of Katerina Reagan, the Nightingale, arriving at the Galaxy Hotel for her afternoon bonk? Did your man get a snap of her leaving by any chance?" "I'm sure he did." "I told you, we've got that story sewn up." "Yes, probably, but bring a copy of the picture of her leaving, will you? I'm curious to see it." "Right you are, sir. But you'll tell me what you've got up your sleeve." "My sleeve," I promised him, "will be entirely open to you." So I went back to chambers, and I passed a despondent Claude. "I'm going to meet the journalist in question now. I have high hopes that you will emerge without a stain on your character." "You needn't invest in Dom Perignon," I told Jonathan Argent when we were established at a discreet table in Pomeroy's, "until you're quite sure you like what I'm going to tell you." "You mean you still haven't thought of a defence in the case of the little boy lost?" "Not exactly. In fact, my defence is a perfectly simple one. The little boy was never lost at all." "You're joking." "No, not really. Tell me, how much did the Trumpet pay Sheena Constant?" He mentioned a generous number of Ks. "Not bad money for sending your Tommy to stay at his great-aunt Brenda's." "What on earth are you talking about? Do you mind telling me what you're talking about?" "I don't mind in the least. I'm talking about fraud. Rather an ingenious one to fool sentimental old folks like me and con your hard-boiled tabloid out of a considerable amount of cash. Poor old darling, what a soft touch you brilliant journalists are." "You mean—" "I mean Aunt Brenda was hired to put on a black mac and a dashing beret and remove the little boy from the mechanical donkey. Did you ever wonder why he went so quietly? Why didn't he cry or yell out? Because he knew he was safe with his dad's old auntie. She looked after him for a week, sometimes at her house, at least once or twice at her fortune shop. Then she dumped him in the squatter's garden as planned, and made the call from the phone box in Swansdown Avenue." "But Sheena recognized your client's voice." "No, she didn't. That was all part of the plot to frame Thelma." "Why Thelma?" "Sheena hates her. That's why they chose Brenda, because she's got rust-colored hair like Thelma's." There was a pause while Jonathan Argent digested the information. Then he asked me if I could prove it. Well, we'll see after I've finished cross-examining Sheena. What I can prove is that Thelma is innocent. How? She spent that week at a residential business course at a country house near Tunbridge Wells. Did she tell you that? Of course not. But we found it out, and we've got witnesses to prove it. Thelma's going to be furious when she hears the evidence. Why? Because it'll prove one thing, that she wants to become a boring little middle manager just like Steve Constant. What did she call herself? Tina Jones, not Santos, just the Christian name. It's odd that they all seem to have been jealous of Tina. The talkative journalist said, "If you tell that story in court, it's going to make the Trumpet look rather foolish. By the way, did you bring me the diva's leaving photograph?" Suddenly he was a very anxious young journalist. "Of course," I said. "I could go and beard Lenny the Lion in his den and see if he'll drop the prosecution." "Could you?" He couldn't help sounding eager. "I could try." "Will you try and settle it?" "On one condition." "You want money?" "I want you to drop the story about Claude Erskine-Brown." "Oh, I think we can do that." "Anyway, it seems you've got the wrong chap." I looked down at the photograph. It showed Katerina leaving the Galaxy with her appointment for the afternoon, the man she had no doubt embraced after her lunch with Claude. It was none other than the huge, booming barrister who had organized her concert in the Outer Temple, Barrington McKern, Q.C., known to me only as Cut Above. "We've checked your client's alibi, Rumpole," said Lenny the Lion-Hearted. "I had a word with the officer in charge of the case." "That was extremely brave of you, and—" "Well, it appears to stand up." "Ah. What are you going to suggest about the Constants?" "I don't suppose the Trumpet wants to look foolish in public?" "No, Lenny, I don't believe it does." "The paper wouldn't welcome a prolonged investigation. You might get a rather bad press if you go on." "Do you know, Rumpole, I've been thinking I might ask to see the judge." "Ah, you always were a brave prosecutor." "Tell him that, all things considered, the prosecution aren't offering any further evidence against your client. So I'll tell him I'm throwing in my hand." "It takes courage to do that." "Will that suit you, Rumpole?" "It will suit me very well indeed." It was over. Thelma had sniffed when she was discharged, and told me that the whole thing had been a complete waste of her time. I got a little parcel from Jonathan Argent and took it to Claude Erskine-Brown in his room. "Here's your picture back, and the negative." "They're not going to use it in the paper?" "Don't worry, there'll be no scandal." "I might have been famous as Katerina Reagan's lover." His voice was full of regret. "You want me to take that picture round to the Sun?" Perhaps not. Let it go." I took the package from him and looked at Claude with pity. Poor fool. He'd really wanted to get his name in the papers.